we don't even know how fast other RVMs or PSPs will be able to respond on VOP requests. So this will offer or need a lot of orchestration and learning once VOP goes live. And I do see this as one of the biggest challenges. So batch is an important topic around verification of Payee in Europe. Shortly, to describe the requirements needed that PSPs need to implement in their solutions. So verification of Payee is mandatory for every payment that's coming from a channel of the PSP. So every payment channel needs to offer verification of Payee services. So that also goes for channels which allow customers to initiate batch payments for instant payments, as well as the regular SEPA credit transfers. Specifically for batches, that means that PSPs need to offer a solution to their customers to check their batches with a verification of Payee check. Specifically for batch payments, there is a possibility for the corporate using the batch payment to opt out of using the service. That does not mean that the PSP can choose not to offer the service. So the PSP needs to offer the service. The customer can choose to opt out of using the service. Since batch is a very new process, so in all existing markets where a verification or confirmation of Payee solution is already live, there are no batch payments being checked currently. As SurePay, we have some experience in checking files, but no batch payments. So it's new for everyone. So there's a lot of uncertainty around this topic. And maybe, Brit, you can start off by maybe explaining or telling a little bit about what you hear in the market from customers when it comes to checking batch payments.
Yeah. Thank you, Eelco, for this introduction. It's a most discussed topic these days. All the banks know they have to implement VOP in their channels for a single transaction, and that's the easy process. But how to deal with batch payments is the second one. And you see that there are a lot of different moments in the process of a corporate when a batch is generated, but also when a batch is uploaded to the bank and how the batch is uploaded to the bank. And thereby the whole discussion starts when in that process of the corporate, do we need to check a batch payment?
Yeah, that's a good topic that you start off with, because the check needs to happen before the batch is authorized. So obviously in a scenario where a batch is uploaded in the payment channel of the PSP, it makes sense because the batch isn't signed yet.
Yeah. And uploaded in the channel. Indeed. And created in the channel.
Indeed. So that seems pretty straightforward. Obviously, different options are there as well for the PSP, but maybe the problems maybe emerge when it comes to host-to-host channels where pre-signed or authorized payment batches are sent directly to the bank for processing. What do you hear in the market on that? What's how do banks?
Yeah, the discussion is also around every transaction has to be checked before authorizing. In this case, host to host is pre-signed. Does that mean that it's not in scope? Well, it is in scope. There's a Q&A topic on that as well from the EPC. But how do you handle in that case also the response of a close match and a no match? Because for the corporate at that stage, the batch is already booked in their bookkeeping system. So what is the best way also for the corporate customers of a bank to implement VOP checks or checks on batches? Because in my opinion, you don't want to interfere also in the processes of the corporate. You really want to accommodate also the checks that fits their processes.
Yeah. So obviously, the best customer journey would be to check it before the batch is
Yeah,
sent to the bank, because then the whole administration doesn't have to be changed, and when there are no matches or close matches.
yeah. And in that case, the discussion is that the opt out what is possible, because you check it way before, and then you check it in a different phase of the process. You check it in your bookkeeping system or your supplier database or whatever before generating the batch.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So that's kind of I guess a legal or interpretation discussion as well. What I learned from the from the Q&A by the European Commission is that the customer can perform the VOP check, and then it's up to the customer on when they decide to act on the result of that VOP check. So the regulation doesn't set any time for that. So if it's a future payment or the intention for a future payment, then I think it still counts as an opt-in. Meaning that it will also be hard to have a direct connection maybe to the actual payment with the VOP check. Do you already hear something from banks on how they intend to solve this or offer this to their customers?
Yes and no, and it's also depends in with who you're talking and what kind of bank it is, of course, because if you're a full wholesale bank, and there are already several ways of delivering and creating batches. If a bank has not that many wholesale customers, there's always a batch possibility, but then it can also be a batch with 2 payments, and then also that's not that difficult. What they struggle with most is the load that will come back, is part of large batches. It can be up to 100,000 transactions that are checked at once as single transactions. So they're really glad that we offer also a separated batch API, because for them that will help the load challenges around batches. The other thing I hear is, but again, that depends on the type of bank, that the opt-out function is really offered to customers, which we all do not agree on, but it is the easy way out. What we also hear is that it can also depend per country how batches are offered. For example, in Germany, the ABIX protocol is really being used by all the German banks, but it's slightly different than, for example, in the Netherlands, how batches are used. So yeah, it's a lot of challenges within the whole of Europe.
Yes, yeah, I hear, I obviously hear the same things that you hear. So yeah, indeed, there are several mechanisms to process batch payments in different countries. That's an interesting challenge. But maybe go back a step where you mentioned that the load is important. And I wanted to elaborate on that a little bit, because when it comes to the load of a batch, I think we will definitely see some challenges in the market. So obviously, as SurePay, now we already operate in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is a market which is highly automated, digital. They already do a lot of online transactions. So we have large payment volumes that we process on a daily basis already. Those are all single checks in the banking landscape. But now, with the batch payments becoming also mandatory to check if there's no opt-out being used, the load will increase, well, maybe by 2, maybe more.
That's the assumption we have today, indeed.
So it's hard to estimate those numbers, but the load will potentially increase by a lot, meaning that the entire ecosystem should also be able to process that load. Now, for the Netherlands, if you take a batch of 100,000 payments, it's very likely that about a third goes to each of the big banks in the Netherlands, or a quarter, something like that. And those banks, they can only respond with a certain speed. So when we process a batch of 100,000, that single batch will be processed very quickly. But all the other batches which come in at that same time, they will have to wait, because there's just no room on the responding side. So one batch will be fast, but then all the other batches have to wait in the Netherlands until that batch is done. So potentially we will see higher processing times, or the responding times need to be way faster than they currently are. And that's just for the Dutch market, for which we have visibility, because we operate the solution in the Netherlands. If you look at the entire European landscape, we don't even know how fast other RVMs or PSPs will be able to respond on VOP requests. So this will offer or need a lot of orchestration and learning once VOP goes live. And I do see this as one of the biggest challenges, especially when we try to deliver on the expectations that customers might have in terms of processing speed.
And Eelco, what do you think about a VOP check needs to be completed within maximum of 5 seconds?
Mm-hmm.
You just said the batches will be stalled because one batch can be processed, but it really depends on the response time, etc. And if there are multiple batches, when starts the 5 seconds maximum?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So the 5 second rule really applies to the single checks. So at the moment that the PSP initiates a single check, then there's a timestamp, and within 5 seconds, the response should be back, preferably within 1 second.
Yeah.
Now, so for the single checks, as SurePay, we don't expect any problems with that, because we currently perform well under that. For batch checks, you deliver a large number of checks in one go. So what we as SurePay need to do when we receive a file from a customer with verification of P-checks is to unpack it. And from the moment that we unpack it and start processing it, then and send in the single check, then that timeline will start. There are, for that reason, also no requirements coming from the EPC verification of P rulebook that say any batch should be checked within this time frame. I guess.
So it really counts at the moment we unpack a batch and it becomes a single VOP transaction, verification of P transaction.
Yeah.
Then the timestamp starts, to be honest.
Indeed. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we can dive a little bit into the solutions that SurePay offers to perform batch checks or bulk verification of P checks.
Please do. Can you tell us about the solutions you see today?
Yes, so SurePay, to keep it simple, we offer two solutions to PSPs. The one solution is an API that PSPs can use to connect to. So that API works asynchronously because keeping a line open for a batch of 100,000 doesn't really make sense. So
no.
There are three parts of the solution. One is you upload the batch with VOP checks to SurePay. SurePay will respond back with a task ID of that batch. With that task ID, you can check the status of the processing, and once the status is complete, you can use that the last part of the solution to download the results. And by that way, we will take over the load. We will make sure that we process the batch as fast as possible. We can process transactions in parallel. We will keep an eye on how fast all the responding banks are responding while making sure that we do not overload the responding sites as well. And the second solution that we offer is our white labeled portal. So that's a portal that we will offer to PSPs. And they can offer that portal to their customers, so they can create accounts for their organizations that they will want to allow to perform bulk verification of PE checks. Their customers can then log into that portal, upload a file. The file is checked, similar as I just explained for the API, and they will get back a result which they can download. So those are the two main options that we offer to PSPs to become compliant with this requirement.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it depends per bank which solution fits them best, and they can also implement both services or use both services for their corporates. What do you see? What we talked about earlier, that corporates will check their bookkeeping data, have a clean set of data, and then do the payments, create the badge, make the payments, etc.
Yeah. So
what do you think about that?
Yeah. It's a good question, Brit. I think my personal view is that this is the best customer journey, right? So a corporate can check their suppliers they have to pay, for instance, and then do that once, make sure that it's correct in their system. What they can obviously do is, when creating the payment, check again. Obviously, you won't expect any no matches or close matches. That's just to be double safe. I've heard the twice is nice a couple of times. It's a coined phrase by by someone we work with a lot. But
Yeah.
So that's a possibility. But obviously, as a corporate, you want to make sure that your base administration is correct. Making sure that you have the correct details of everyone you have to pay, and no fraud or mistakes occur in the batch. So that would be the ideal situation. Obviously, the instant payment regulation talks about payments. So then we go into the discussion that we just had, right? So when is it still an intended payment? So yeah, it should be a future payment or related to a future payment. But the rulebook also says you should check every payment. So if you just check your base administration once, and then maybe after a given time, then you should opt out for every payment that you do. And the question really is this indeed how the regulation is intended?
Yeah, and also the liability will shift.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because
case,
if you don't check every payment and you choose to opt out, then you as a customer or a corporate making a payment are liable in case of errors, and you cannot hold the bank liable in this case. So that's a good addition you make there, Brit. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we've covered most of the difficult topics when it comes to batch payments. Obviously, a lot still has to be investigated in the market, and we will see some solutions emerge over time. I don't have anything to add at this point. I don't know if you have anything you haven't thought about.
No, I think this is also a reach out to everyone. If you have any additions or requirements to add, please let us know. We are open for discussions and brainstorms. To make sure that we at the end have the best solution for the corporate, but also for the bank, of course.
Yeah, well, then I would say thank you for this chat, Brit. Nice to talk a little bit about the batches.
On to the next.